And here we are, another open house. We are at 370 J Street, although in real life we're not, but we are emotionally at 370 J Street. I am here with Erica Matsumoto, and we are going to introduce you to four spectacular companies. But today we thought, before we got into the four companies specifically from the many years at the Combine, we would start with just a quick overview of the Media Lab and what it's done in the past and kind of what its mission is, and then what projects we did in 2019, which is what you would have been seeing in real life if you were at 370. So first of all, for those of you who are new, we are a university consortium. We are an extraordinary collection of really some of the most impressive institutions in New York University, Columbia, the New School, Pratt, CUNY, SVA, and Manhattan College, and supported by NYC, EDC, and the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. And we have an extraordinary group of corporate members, including ASCAP, the Associated Press, Estee Lauder, Hearst, Shutterstock, Verizon, and the New York Times, just to name a few. Today, we're going to talk about this year that just is wrapping up for us as we come into the summer. Really, the Media Lab, by the numbers, is an amazing story. And I thought the best thing to do would be to bring Erica on to talk about the numbers and then some of the programs, and then we'll get into four extraordinary companies. Erica?
Thanks, Steve. We are so excited to showcase and highlight the impact across our portfolios over the past year. So to start, we've supported dozens of university-based startups and entrepreneurs, four of whom, which we'll hear from today, are projects that bring together our corporate members as well as university faculty and graduate students, have led to dozens of prototypes that explored applications of emerging tech, including immersive, spatial computing, as well as natural language processing and computer vision. We've awarded over $1 million to participating university faculty and graduate students this past year. We've had hundreds of graduate students and faculty participate in our programs, and have had actually thousands of people attend our events over the course of the year.
Yeah, it's been an amazing year, actually, and the Combine is core to it. I mean, we really have had an amazing 5 years of programs and companies, and today we're going to basically introduce you to four of them who come from a number of across a number of different years. So we're going to today introduce you to Canairy, Geopipe, Ovee, and Aduri, and each one of them is going to give us an update on how they're doing and how the startup environment in general is doing. And then at the end, we'll gather all together and talk a little bit. So to begin with, let us begin with Canairy.
Hi, my name is Rayees Rahman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Canairy. And Canairy is a platform that leverages machine learning and voice analysis to track and monitor changes in patients' respiratory health over time. We have an excellent team here at Canairy that includes Emily Wang, who is completing her undergrad degree at Cornell in business and biology, and is currently a Teal Fellow. Alexandra DeRosa, who is our Chief Regulatory Officer and has decades of experience in managing clinical trials over at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And Chi Bello, who is our Chief of Product and has many years of working at eBay for developing product. Chronic respiratory disease is a huge problem in the United States. About 100 million people suffer from diseases such as asthma, COPD, bronchitis, and it costs about $150 billion per year to manage these chronic diseases. And these things are being compounded by increasing urbanization, an increasing elderly population, and a higher prevalence of smoker. And even in this time, COVID-19 represents a huge problem to chronic respiratory disease management. There are four major components in managing patients with chronic respiratory disease. One is monitoring. A lot of chronic respiratory disease involves self-care and self-management, which is hard for a lot of elderly patients and patients who don't have digital therapeutics to help them. Additionally, there are other mitigating factors such as environmental hazards such as smoke and pollutants, medication management, and management of exacerbations, things such as pollution levels in the environment that cause respiratory attacks. And there are many critical pain points because of these deficiencies in managing patients with chronic respiratory disease. Many of these patients have problems addressing their caregivers and telling them how they're feeling during the day. And likewise, PCPs, allergists, and other physicians have difficulties monitoring their patients remotely. And so what we're building is a platform for patients with chronic respiratory disease and their care team to manage their chronic respiratory health. The way we do this is we build an at-home monitoring platform that records ambient noise either through a smartphone or a smart home device, and it integrates with our technology to send alerts to both the care team and the patients and monitors health outcomes. And we do this based on tracking how cough changes over time. You can see here, you can see kind of a cough fairly early on in the left, and then the right, kind of an exacerbated cough. And we're training machine learning models based on different types of coughs, such as pneumonia, asthma, bronchitis, to identify which coughs are becoming worse and which coughs are becoming better over time. And we use a machine learning, an advanced machine learning architecture to do it. And our results are particularly great. We're able to identify and classify different types of coughs as different types of diseases. And we have very good state-of-the-art performance in classifying these distinct types of coughs. And what we're working on now is actually a patient-focused app to enable patients to monitor their respiratory health at home. And this information syncs on the cloud and enables physicians to monitor patients remotely. The current total market size for respiratory health is fairly large. And with this coronavirus epidemic, there's even more opportunities to manage patients' well-being during this time. We have a very interesting business model where we integrate with, I guess this information is not really needed if it's a general talk. And what we do is help insurance companies. We use our data set and our proprietary knowledge to reduce risk factors for patients and immediately reduce costs for insurers. And what we can do is actually build a model that predicts future exacerbations and enables patients and insurers to monitor patients particularly well. Canairy is not just a platform for respiratory health. We can also use our information and our data set to monitor diseases such as Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, ALS, because there's a severe neurological component to voice, as well as infectious disease, such as the COVID-19 outbreak, but also other infectious diseases such as the flu and the common cold. One thing that we didn't mention is our accomplishments. So we've had a string of accomplishments in this past year that we've been working on Canairy. We won 3rd place at the Startup of the Year Award over at South by Southwest. We won 1st place in the She Loves Tech pitch competition last year, as well as the international finals where we won 3rd place. And those are pretty much our updates. Thanks.
So incredibly timely. I will tell you that until 90 days ago, a couple of months ago, I had no idea how complicated the medical system was and how everyone didn't just agree on everything and science didn't so you find yourself in a place where I assume that people now are much more interested in what you do when you talk to investors broadly. Kind of talk about how things have changed for you.
Yeah. So when we first started out, we actually wanted to do a diagnosis company, and we wanted to diagnose patients for lung cancer. And we realized that training machine learning models may be useful, but it doesn't give clinicians the actual information that they need to manage these patients and to help patients with chronic lung disease. And so we pivoted, and due to the Combine program, we actually pivoted towards management of chronic respiratory disease as opposed to diagnosis. And because of this, investors weren't kind of happy with that. It's not the most sexiest thing if you're not doing diagnosis and you're doing management. And then all of a sudden now with COVID-19 and the need to manage patients remotely and the need to make sure patients' respiratory well-being is intact, especially during these times where patients with chronic respiratory disease are most at risk from dying from COVID-19, a lot of investors, a lot of people sort of in the industry and healthcare are really taking a second look at our approach, not to focus on diagnosis, but really to manage these patients and to help physicians manage their patients as well.
Got it. Thanks for that presentation. So the Combine program, takes really early stage university startup teams and really offers them a user-centered, user-focused program. I believe over the course of the 3 months, we require 100 user interviews. Could you tell us about how the Combine helped you and your team develop your concept and how that's shaped where you are today?
Yeah, thank you. So the Combine actually really shaped the trajectory of Canairy. We actually came up with the idea for Canairy at a hackathon in 2018, early 2018. And that idea was mainly to diagnose patients for lung cancer based on the sound of a cough. And then when we went to the Combine program, we thought this idea was great. We didn't need any tune-ups, prima facie, this is like fairly exciting. And then when we actually went and talked to physicians and talked to patients and talked to insurance agencies and providers, first of all, people, clinicians won't take an algorithm, a machine learning algorithm seriously for diagnosing lung cancer. They'll always go back to blood tests. They'll always go back to CAT scan, CT, X-rays. So that kind of tech was not needed for them. And then there's a huge opportunity. And what we notice is that patients with existing chronic respiratory disease, they have no way to manage their disease. There's no digital therapeutics. There's no apps for them to manage other than maybe some diary keeping apps and things that just don't make their lives easier. And what we found is that these patients actually comprise the bulk of the costs for most insurance companies. When we talk to insurance companies, they told us that, COPD patients alone are hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars each year in terms of management, because these patients are just so chronically undermanaged. And so when we sort of got that feedback back through our customer discovery interviews, through talking to people, that kind of turned the gears and made us kind of realize that there's a bigger opportunity here and to do even greater and cooler things. We're still focusing, I think, Steve Blank, kind of the idea, the person who came up with the lean startup method says, a pivot is not a change in direction. It's not a change in vision, it's a change in direction. And I think, in the future, we want to do diagnosis and we want to kind of train an algorithm to do, identify patients at risk for these diseases with high sensitivity and specificity. But, in the proximal, I think there's a huge need for patients with chronic respiratory disease and their management. So the Combine helped us with that.
That's a really interesting point. So going from diagnoses to more management of a diagnosed or known sort of illness.
Mm-hmm. So last question, not so much business related. You connected with a bunch of other companies as part of the Combine. You've stayed in touch with some of them, I assume, and you're also deeply connected with the medical community. How are you guys doing?
So right now we are focusing on kind of grant writing. We kind of made the decision early last year to really decide whether or not we want to do a venture raise or kind of go the non-dilutive route. And because of the COVID-19 and because of kind of the lack of liquidity in the capital markets, we kind of decided, there's a lot of opportunities to write grants. And, I actually just finished my PhD. And so I'm used to this sort of scientific grant writing. So we're waiting on a few grants. We're submitting a few as well. And we're also in the middle of beta testing. And so we're finishing up our app to deploy on the App Store and the Google Play Store fairly soon. And we want to get a cohort of patients and people to actively use the app and give us feedback.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting.
Thank you.
So from medicine to something completely different. Erica, next up, we have Geopipe. Different, but yet again, not different. I mean, as the world becomes more home-based and more virtual and more electronic, the need for, I think, the data set that Geopipe is putting together, it becomes more and more interesting. But let's definitely introduce Christopher and take a look at Geopipe.
So if you've ever considered what it would take to turn the real world into a rich virtual copy, you would realize that this is a huge, huge undertaking. If you think of the amount of detail in a single block of New York City, in a single building, in a side of a single building, it's a huge amount of information. My co-founder and I discovered that there's a huge need for putting the real world in virtual space, starting from the video game industry and through the Combine and many other accelerators and opportunities, discovering the breadth of this problem. And we founded Geopipe. So today, Geopipe makes it possible to automatically build rich virtual copies of the real world for games, simulations, and visualization. We can rapidly, in less than a day, map entire cities from raw sensor data with not only how the world looks, but what's in the world, with every building, tree, road, and sidewalk labeled and reproduced. We discovered that raw sensor data about the world, things like photographs and laser scans, are increasingly democratized and accessible, collectible by drones, UAVs, helicopters, cars, and that customers today increasingly need virtual copies of the real world for visualization, simulation, and interaction. And especially today, when many people are stuck inside their homes or unable to go visit places in person, it's even more important to be able to put the real world into virtual space. But we found that there's a missing link between that raw data and the 3D maps and models that customers want to actually use. Geopipe is that missing link. As I said, I'm Christopher Mitchell. I co-founded Geopipe with my longtime friend and colleague, Thomas Dickerson, who got his PhD also in computer science at Brown University. Will Pryor, who spent almost a decade in the drone and 3D data space at a company in San Francisco, joins us as our VP of Biz Dev and Sales. He's been with the company for a few months now. We have a full-time team of 6 now, as well as 6 other part-timers and interns. And we have an advisory board spanning expertise in business, entrepreneurship, and academia, including an NYU professor. We are going after 3 primary verticals: gaming, simulation, and architecture. We found that in gaming, it can take hundreds and hundreds of person months to build rich 3D copies of existing cities, even a few square miles of a city for games. And increasingly, gamers are calling for the real world in their games, for big open world so-called sandbox games that they can explore. With Geopipe, we can deliver models of a city in less than an hour. Similarly, architects need to be able to put the real world in virtual space, to visualize new buildings in context, to perform things like view and shadow studies, and to create the kinds of beautiful renderings and videos you expect to see for new projects. It can take them an hour per city block to create just plain white masked models, 4 times as much for colored and textured and detailed models, and hundreds to thousands of hours if they need an entire neighborhood. With Geopipe, they can get a model of any size at any level of detail in 30 seconds. And looking towards the future, we're working with companies who need to train personnel and autonomous vehicles in the real world, and who similarly need to reproduce every single detail of the real world, from the locations of lanes to curbs to traffic lights and signs to the individual buildings, windows, and doors in the world. In the last 3.5 or so years, we've developed 2 powerful products that are in use by revenue-generating customers today. Geopipe Context Snap was our first product aimed towards early adopters in architecture. It allows customers to see our 3D models of cities directly in a web browser, click on objects to see the metadata that Geopipe knows about them, like how tall they are, what they're made of, and what exactly they are. And then most importantly to them, select an area and download it as an industry standard file they can use in their own software. More recently, we've also created the Geopipe API and SDK. It's a way that customers can stream Geopipe worlds directly into game engines. And we find that these game engines like Unity and Unreal are being used not just for games themselves, but for simulations, for virtual reality, for architectural visualizations, and for many of these immersive interactive applications. Of course, we're a deep tech company, so one of the coolest parts for us is how it works under the hood. We start with this raw data about the world, photographs, laser scans, traditional GIS data. We pass this through a rich data pipeline, hence Geopipe, that processes this geographic data, first segmenting out where the buildings, the trees, the roads, the water, and much more are. And then for each of those objects, identifying the locations of windows and doors, the materials on the sides of structures, the heights and crown diameters of trees, and much more. We can then turn those rich 3D maps into immersive 3D worlds, cities that can be prepared in less than 24 hours for hundreds of square miles. We bootstrapped ourselves with almost 4 years of deep R&D to create our 2 powerful products. We found our product market fit with dozens of paying and beta enterprise customers. We've gone through accelerator programs like, of course, the NYC Media Lab, the Techstars NYC program, the Creative Destruction Lab, and most recently, we are in the Genius NY program, all of which have allowed us to build our team, understand our markets, and bring the same rigor to the business that we bring to the science behind the business. We've garnered over $2 million in primarily non-dilutive funding, including NSF, SBIR Phase 1 and 2 grants, incubator and accelerator funding, and angel pre-seed investments. And we're now in the process of scaling to meet specific traction and revenue milestones in the next 12 months. I would be more than happy to talk more about Geopipe. Very passionate about what we're doing. We're excited about putting the entire world into virtual space. And especially these days, we're excited to let people do more from the safety of their homes. Thank you.
I guess my immediate question is, I thought as COVID was gearing up that VR, AR stuff would explode on the consumer market, but it seems more like it's been consistent. Like, do you have a sense of kind of whether or not in the long term COVID changes the trajectory of the space you're in?
That's a good question. I think one of the biggest changes we've seen is more and more consumers spending time with video gaming. I think those who are already gamers have doubled down on gaming. They have more time to game. And I think those who may have only kind of peripherally been aware of gaming may be spending a little bit more time exploring what's out there. I think in the short term, that's going to be with the devices that they already have, with their computers, with their consoles, even with their phones. And I think if they don't already have VR hardware, they may not be rushing out to buy VR hardware. From our end, by the way, we've always seen ourselves more as a content company than as explicitly a VR company, in that we can take our models and we can put them into any platform, whether it is on a screen, in a VR headset, on a phone, or even 3D printed back into a physical object. What we provide is the data. So we're a little bit agnostic to what actually happens, whether people are playing games on a screen or in a VR headset. But I think we'll certainly see more people exploring VR, as they spend more time, in their homes, in these environments where they might want to get a bit of a change of pace and feel that they are somewhere other than their own homes.
Awesome. Sort of along those lines, we've noticed that there are a lot of esports platforms that are being used for purposes well beyond gaming. How do you see Geopipe sort of aligning with that emerging trend?
Absolutely. And that's been one of the biggest challenges for us, even as we focused on presenting our data as 3D models and through video game engines. We've seen huge numbers of applications that use video game engines for many disparate uses. Choosing which ones to go after ourselves has been an interesting and I suppose a good challenge to have. We work directly with some of the video game engine companies, and we're seeing that they're spending significant time on customers who are not traditional, entertaining gaming customers, whether those are companies who want to train personnel or autonomous vehicles, whether those are more defense applications, whether those are more traditional visualization applications where you may want to immerse somebody in a virtual copy of a real environment for very serious things like seeing how a new building will look, for example. And I think we're going to continue seeing more and more of those. The appeal is that video game engines already solve how do you interact with the world, how do you make it look good while still being real time. And I think that's going to be the driver behind a lot of the connection between the real world and the virtual world.
So last question, startups are stressful in good times. They're a roller coaster. You get good days and bad days, good hours and bad hours. We're in particularly challenging times. What do you do? What does the team do to keep itself centered and focused and positive in challenging times?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a bit of an unfair advantage because we were already a bit of a geographically distributed team. So we had a little bit of experience, collaborating remotely. We always, for quite some time now, we've had a weekly virtual stand-up where everybody gets together and talks about what they did the last week, what they're going to do this week, and any challenges and blockers. And I think that helps keep the team a little bit more close-knit. We've ramped that up even more, encouraging people to over-communicate, talk on Slack, whether it's about, serious work-related stuff or just, what's on their minds. And I think that's helped with sanity a lot. Many on the team is not surprising, or gamers. So, getting to game together is a lot of fun. And just being there for each other, talking about the things that we're all having problems with, like, maintaining a sane sleep schedule when we don't get enough exercise to actually tire ourselves out. I think, realizing that we're sharing some of those same struggles and, coming up with common ways to solve them together, I think has been really helpful.
Christopher, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Jane from Ovee talking about their product, which is an exciting, really important solution in femtech and also wellness. So Jane, take it away.
Hi, I'm Jane. I'm a co-founder of Ovee, and we're a sexual and reproductive health hub for people with vaginas. We're a team of designers, health scientists, and developers, as well as women, daughters, sisters, and potentially mothers. And we created Ovee for people like Allie. Allie is a college freshman who is newly sexually active and just started to experience some strange symptoms, including a strange odor, vaginal discharge, and extreme itching. If you've experienced any of these symptoms before, you know how uncomfortable it can be. And if you haven't, just trust us, it's very uncomfortable. Now imagine you're Allie. You're new to sex and you didn't receive an adequate sex education in high school, and you really don't know who to turn to. So she does what most of us do when we have an issue with our body, and she turned to Google, where she ended up down this rabbit hole of panic-inducing WebMD articles, conflicting information. And so she ends up finding things like suggestions to put yogurt-soaked tampons up her vagina, and this really freaks her out. And she's not alone in this. There are nearly 33 million women aged 15 to 29 in the United States that are already spending 3 times more than men on healthcare. And the market is growing super rapidly, but it's so fragmented and focuses mainly on fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum, making it even harder for Allie to find the resources that she needs. And so that's why we created Ovee. Our gynecological search concierge and personalized health dashboard connects Allie to medically vetted content, curated products, and the supportive community she needs to navigate her sexual and reproductive health confidently. Through the dashboard, Allie can save content, ask questions in a safe space via our search concierge, or talk with a real human if she needs to. She can also store medical records and set reminders for her appointment. Not only do we provide Allie with digital resources, but also physical solutions. Our inclusive marketplace covers products from menstruation to hygiene to pleasure that are vetted and tested by the Ovee team. We take extra care to hand select these products to go in our box, which has curated solutions for specific pelvic healthcare needs. This is great for people who don't know where to start, like Allie. And over the past 9 months, we've developed dozens of partnerships with trusted organizations in the femtech space to connect with our community members. And we've also had high engagement rates across all verticals. Our community is searching for answers, and they're finding them through Ovee. And since the Combine, we focused on defining our products and launching our e-commerce platform. We've grown and scaled our user base from 600 to over 8,000 users in just 5 months. And we've presented at South by Southwest and Forbes Under 30. We've also expanded to Puerto Rico and Latin America. And due to the COVID-19, we've been delivering period products to people who are not able to leave their homes so that they feel supported during their menstruation, since it seems to be something that doesn't stop for a pandemic. And currently we're focused on scaling our community through content marketing, as well as in the next 4 months, beginning to monetize that community through our commerce sales. And then in 6 months, collecting data and trends from the community, and that will allow us to build out our dashboard beta in the next year. Thanks. Those are all the updates from Ovee.
So a long time ago now, I don't remember the year, my former company I was with worked with Eve Ensler on the vagina monologues. And I remember at the time using that word in mainstream media and advertising was incredibly complicated and difficult. And as you said the brand name and talked about the product, I found myself thinking that it hasn't changed as much as I thought it might have. Like, it's still a little shocking. That's on purpose, right?
Yeah, I think we're very intentional about the language that we use, especially since part of our mission is to normalize words like vagina and normalize conversations around periods. So for us, when we do talk about our users, they are vagina havers. And that's also a way for us to make sure that people who maybe don't identify as women feel included and supported by our platform.
So Jane, I think, I really love your team and your mission, and I think it's so important to make sure that your perspective and your mission have a voice in the future of, health tech and even femtech. How are you seeing the rise in sort of telemedicine and remote medicine as part of like your team's next steps? Do you see this as an opportunity for Ovee?
Yeah, so this is something that we had on our radar, I think, since the Combine, thinking about how we can create that sort of digital space for people to come to and talk about their health problems. But since COVID-19 and the need for our people to stay inside, we've really accelerated that process and put it at the forefront of our priorities for the next year, and trying to get telemedicine set up as are integrated into our platform sooner rather than later.
So last question, part of what the Combine does is connects different startups from different areas. And I hope you stayed in touch with some of your colleagues from your year and other years. What are you hearing and what are people doing in the startup space that you're aware of to kind of keep themselves centered and emotionally healthy and kind of on track?
Yeah, I think in the startup world, a lot of what we do, especially as a digital health company, and a lot of our partners are digital as well, and the people we've worked with at the Combine, we're already pretty set up to work from home. So that was great, and it was already an easier transition for us. I think what we had initially struggled with, and what we've heard from other companies is staying connected, and as Christopher mentioned, amping up that communication and encouraging our co-founders to stay as in touch as possible, and having those weekly meetings and not missing them, being sure to share everything that especially the wins, like sharing big wins or small wins and things that we've completed, and making sure to stay positive. Yeah.
Jane, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. Good luck.
All right. So last but not least, and this is not an accident. We wanted this fourth company to go last because we thought it was important to kind of pull together all of the stress and complication and fears and hopes and dreams of our collection of startups, and talk about a startup that's actually working on keeping people more centered and kind of paddling in the right direction. So with that, let's bring on Aduri and Jaisal.
Hey everybody, my name is Jaisal Trivedi. I'm the CEO and founder of Aduri. We are making people healthier and happier through ritualization of meditation and mindfulness. So there's an opportunity here, and I think it's more apparent now than ever before in our history. More people meditate now than ever before, and even before COVID-19, it has been rising primarily because of meditation apps and the ease of access to incorporate mindfulness into people's lives. But the problem is that meditation apps have been great at access, but not really tied to outcomes and providing those outcomes. And in fact, 85% of people that download these apps end up stop using them within just 10 days. And that's a really big problem, because in order for people to tap into the actual benefits that come with a consistent practice, you have to have some sort of ritualization and consistency. I mean, if we could all get a six-pack going to the gym once a month, that would be fantastic. But same thing with meditation. You have to be consistent in order to see results. And so what we do is we make the meditation experience more immersive. That helps people keep practicing longer. Our system is consisting of three main areas, what we love to call the 3 C's: a haptic cushion, original content, and community. Now, how does this work? So our haptic cushion gently vibrates to guide breathing and focus with biofeedback from connected wearables. These vibrations are then integrated with all of our original contents produced by our Aduri guides. These are guided sessions, music, and soundscapes. On top of that, in terms of our community, cushions can actually sync together, which you can enable virtual classes from where we are all quarantined apart, or in-person group-based sessions. And Our team has over 50 years of design and manufacturing experience, coming from companies like West Elm and Karam Rashad, Equinox, Citibank, MakerBot, and more. And we're we're all remote, so COVID-19 hasn't had too bad of an impact on how we have operated last year. Now, the market size is very interesting, right? We're seeing a rise in these digital fitness and connected at-home fitness companies like Peloton really taking off in the market. And it seems like the time for products like ours it's really optimal, so we can meet people where they're at home and provide well-being resources. And I think this has shifted our strategy over the last 6 weeks alone, in the sense of providing actual content. And I'm happy to go into that in a bit. Our product offering works very simple, very similar to Peloton, where we have a cushion that provides gentle haptic vibrations that guides breathing. And then we have the app subscription. And then next year, we'll be launching our first line of CPG products. We have been fortunate to have been mentioned in a few press, which has come after our Kickstarter campaign last summer. And I think this is a little bit alluding to what I was mentioning. So 6 weeks ago, when New York City went into a lockdown, we had a team meeting. We were like, how can we provide the best experiences and content for people who need it the most? And so we developed a 4-event series that happens every week, that has several mindfulness-based and meditation-based programming, anything from Mindset Mondays to immersive music meditations, guided virtual meditations, and even brand collaborations, which have been just incredibly well received. We've thrown over 20 events since the beginning of April. And I think it's really meeting people where they're at and really helping them bring mindfulness home, wherever home is for them. Anything from laughter therapy, which was a lot of fun, to live piano meditation with Colin Huggins. He's the guy in New York City in Washington Square Park that hauls out his massive grand piano. We were actually supposed to do a live event with him, but we did something on IG Live, and it was beautiful. And we have a Mindful May event series that is really reflective of Mental Health Awareness Month and National Meditation Month. We have also been made a finalist for Orgain's grant for greater good, which actually ends on May 25th. There's a massive voting competition with 6 incredible companies. And so I think that I would love your support and love there. And so we can help continue bringing mindfulness home. And I think in terms of updates, I think that's pretty it. We've been really busy just producing as much content as we could and can be.
The thing that's so interesting to me is, there are positive, complicated challenges that come out of what we're all dealing with. But it seems to me it is an opportunity for people to rethink some patterns in their lives and try some new things. And I assume that that's been your experience out there in the world as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we're not really seeing the effects of the mental health in terms of isolation and loneliness. And we won't see them because everyone's in isolation. only until we actually start reemerging into our worlds and on the street will we really be able to see the impact. And so hopefully giving people resources and building rituals before the world opens up again would hopefully make that transition much easier for them. And that's what we're hoping for with all our free content that we're providing.
All right, I have a question about meditation practices in general. So Jason, I know we've talked about this in other formats, but all right. So I've heard that meditation and applications for mindfulness are really sort of gaining traction in in our world today. What advice do you have for people who want to build out a practice but have a tough time sort of building in that consistency, even now, as a practitioner yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's routines have, including mine, have become disrupted with these new just like quarantine habits that we're forming. The easiest way is to latch your habit onto an existing habit. I think that's the best way. So if you associate yourself brushing your teeth, and then right after brushing your teeth, you sit for 1 minute. And it could literally just be 1 minute. Just getting yourself in the practice of just like, okay, I'm just going to sit on my cushion. I'm going to sit on my chair for 1 minute. And then over time, that's something that can eventually be drawn out. I mean, one of the best examples that I've heard was in terms of going for a run or going to the gym, of just putting on your shoes. And that's it. You don't have to go to the gym. Just, you want to make sure that you are ritualizing the action in your mind, so that you are prepping your whole body awareness for that exercise and for that practice.
Fascinating. All right, let's do this. Let's bring in all of the other company leaders, and then we'll talk a little bit as a group. So come on back, everybody. All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot. You know, part of being a startup presenter is everything's always going great. It's always up and to the right. Things are all like, I mean, that's your job. It's you're a leader, you're pitch people, you're brand builders. But I'm going to ask you to be a little bit honest. What's been hard? What's the thing that you didn't think that would throw you a curve in COVID world that actually has been harder than you thought it was going to be?
For Ovee, I would say initially it went really well for us. Like, everyone was moving to finding content online, trying to consume digital content. But as soon as other companies started to create more digital content, it became saturated. And now we've kind of seen a dip in that initial spike in numbers. So that was something that we were like, yay, and then kind of took a dive recently. And then another thing that we've had issues with is that we carry some inventory for our e-commerce store, and the building that it is in shut down. So we can't get any of it. So that's been great as well.
I think this is an interesting question, because in December, we started getting effects of just factories shutting down in China with everything. And we're a hardware software business. And so that just impacted all our just getting actual components in December and January, until we switched vendors to here. And then the vendors only exclusively made PPEs and just defibrillators and just ventilation systems. And so it was just like, wait, they can't work on our product at all, because there's way more important things that have to be made for everybody's health, for all these hospital systems around the country. So, I mean, it's the rightful decision for us to deprioritize the cushion and do whatever small part that we could. But I mean, our hardware product is now delayed because we are pre-launch. And so with no really certainty of our timeline. And so we had to switch fairly quickly of, okay, how do we move and provide that value of the content that we are already going to create now, and provide that as a resource, so people, one, can learn about our brand, and two, and just like what Jane said, there was this saturation of content, and I think we're finding our little niche here of brand collaborations. No other meditation content company is really doing brand collaborations the way that we are. So hopefully we can double down on that. But yeah, we've been fortunate to have been called in, so to speak, to help people navigate this.
I think one of our biggest challenges is almost a blessing in disguise. Like I'm sure many of you, some of our initial conversations slowed down. You know, many of our pipeline conversations right at the top start with in-person meetings where we shake hands, talk over a desk, and discuss ways that we can collaborate. And of course, there's none of that happening these days. The silver lining is that it's given us an opportunity to spend more time on the conversations that were already in our pipeline, on the customers that we were already having discussions with, focus a little bit more on how we can succeed with those customers and actually build that solution together. Relatedly, we've also, since we're not traveling as much, going to conferences and trade shows, we're also spending a lot more time on the core tech, and I think it's allowed us to accelerate parts of our product development beyond where they would be otherwise. So, you know, I know we're extraordinarily fortunate in that we can do what we do remotely, and we've been taking advantage of the time to do so.
So for us, it's a combination of things. The first thing that we immediately had to do was pivot kind of dramatically. Initially, we were looking towards mainly chronic respiratory diseases, COPD, bronchitis, asthma. But with COVID-19, it's a huge opportunity to waste in a sense. And we had to kind of retool kind of algorithms that we wrote, or that I wrote over the course of a year, to see if we can sort of modulate and track COVID-19 and infectious disease in that way. And so it was a lot of retooling on that point. And then on the flip side, what's interesting is that there's a lot of competition now. Before, you know, cough diagnosis, cough analytics, these types of things were kind of esoteric and not particularly prevalent. The competition landscape was quite limited to maybe 3 or 4 players. Now you have hackathons, quite like us, that come up with the idea of cough classification and then diagnosis. And people are sort of still in that honeymoon phase of, you know, can we diagnose COVID-19 with a cough? Is there like a distinctive signature based on that? And what's nice is that we have about a year of work to show that diagnosis based on coughs is sort of unreliable and not particularly specific. So we have that kind of leg up on the current competition, and really it's just retooling and retrofitting our existing pipelines and machine learning algorithms for the opportunity at hand.
What about finance? Are VCs just throwing money at all you guys?
So we've had a lot of them show interest, and it's a function of like a lot of VCs are very interested in us, and they want to throw money at us. But I think we, as a team, kind of decided to bootstrap it a little bit more, just because the terms aren't particularly great in this particular year. And I think if we have a user base and if we have a validating study, we can potentially get better terms in the following year. And also, you know, there's a lot of interest outside of the scope of VCs, and I think there's an opportunity for us to bootstrap it with either our own money or with angels and with grants. So.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of us, we have aligned ourselves with mostly angels, and we've been fortunate to align ourselves with the strategic, and hopefully that helps our fundraising process, which kicks off later this month, knowing that digital at-home connected fitness is one of the most sought after consumer areas for consumer VCs. And so we want to make sure that, one, we can provide the numbers, and I know it's going to be a little bit difficult because we are pre-product. We haven't delivered the product yet. And so it is this balance of what can we raise right now that can help increase our runway and bring the product to market, as well as just understanding and sort of validating subsequent fundraisers and staggering those out to make sure that we can hit our milestones over the next 2 years.
All right. Last question. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. What are you most excited about given this global pandemic and, you know, all the challenges that we're all facing? What's the one silver lining that you're looking forward to for the rest of 2020? Send on a positive note. No right or wrong answer.
Wait. I'll go first. I'm learning how to bake bread.
Same, actually.
I'm baking cookies.
There you go.
Finally have the time to exercise a little bit more and finally learn guitar, as I've been planning to for years.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
That's awesome. I've been sketching a lot. I thought, so when I was growing up, I always thought I'd be a car designer. So I'm getting back into the rhythm of just like drawing cards. And I think it's also because I'm at my parents' house and I'm in my high school bedroom where it's like re-inspiring me to see everything. And so it's like I'm just like channeling that internal energy, that youthful energy, that younger energy, and just like letting the imagination run wild.
Well, thank you all.
Oh.
Totally appreciate the open house visit, and wish you guys an extraordinary year ahead. Everyone stay healthy and safe, and wear a mask.
Thanks for having us.
Stay
Thank you
safe.
so much.
Thank
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe.